Please welcome Tom Phillips. Tom?
My mic on? Anybody hear me? Don't worry, the voice doesn't get any better. That's just the way it is. I got a question before we start, though. How many people are out there wondering, what the heck is this guy doing up there? Well, I'm wondering the same thing, too. So, yesterday, Steve was talking about being nervous. I'm always nervous when I do these things. But I've got a lot to talk about in a short period of time, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. First, I'm going to tell you my story. My faith story started in the 10th grade. A group of my friends and I were all best friends. We were top in our class, but we weren't believers. And a man in our town developed a heart for the youth. And through that process, one at a time, we started becoming believers. And there was a group of us, 10 to 15 of us at that time that weren't believers. And between the 10th and 11th grade, God got a hold of every one of us and changed our lives. And then we started doing Bible studies together and growing. And then we all went off to college. And it was a great time because I was growing in the Lord. I was spending time with them, and I wanted to do something significant for the kingdom. And over time, as we went to college, these guys, each one of them started committing to go to seminary and be a preacher. Now, it first started with David, then it was Bruce, then it was Jim, then it was Daniel. It kept going on. After a while, every one of us had committed to go into full-time ministry except one person. It's me. And I felt like a second-class citizen. And all the way through college, I kept arguing with God. Come on, God, I need to be a preacher. Of course, with a voice like this, God didn't equip me to be a preacher. So I was struggling with God and struggling with what He wanted me to do. And we spent a lot of time together in prayer. I don't want to say arguing, but discussing this possibility. But God, through a process, taught me that He would show me how He was going to use me. So after the struggle, He told me, I actually was leaving Memphis. My wife has a master's degree, and she went to Memphis to get the master's degree, and we were from Arkansas. And on the last trip home, I'd been working in Arkansas and was moving to Memphis with my wife, and I prayed from Little Rock to Brinkley about this issue because I was pretty angry with God because I wanted to be used for the kingdom. I wanted to do something significant for God. And then I stopped in Brinkley and got a burger from McDonald's, and as soon as I turned on the radio, there was a folk ballad on. And there was also a children's book by the same name called Once Upon a Tree. Some of you may have heard it, but God was speaking through this song to me. It talks about these three trees that want to stand up and point to God. The first one wanted to be cut down and made into a palace for kings. The second one wanted to be cut down and made into a selling vessel to go get treasures from all over the world. And the third one wanted to just stand tall and point to God. Well, as time went along, the first one was cut down, but instead of being made into a palace for kings, was made into a feeding trough. And the second one, when it was cut down, it was exciting when it went to the shipyard, but instead of being made into a sailing vessel to bring back the treasures of the world, it was made into a smelly fishing boat. And the last one, that wanted to stand tall and point to God, was cut down and carried into the timber yard. But in time, and I'm shortening this quite a bit from the story, but in time, that feed trough was a manger. That tree that wanted to be made into a palace for kings now held the King of Kings. And that fishing boat that wanted to sell the world and bring back treasures, there was one day there was a preacher on the bank, and he got up in the boat and he backed out and he preached to the people on the shore. And now that boat that wanted to go sell the world and bring back treasures had the greatest treasure that man would ever know. And that tree that wanted to stand tall and point to God was made into a cross. And every time that we look at that cross, we think of our Lord. And that song happened that day as soon as I got back in the car after turning on the radio. And God spoke to me. He said, Tom, I want you to be faithful in whatever I call you to do. And as you're faithful, I will show you. So I had a call that day from God to be faithful, and he would show me in time what he was going to do and how he's going to pack this kingdom with me. And so then my journey began. And I see God's fingerprints all over it. I got a job as a gopher. You know how that is? Go get it. That was my job for this company. And I just took it for a year because my wife was getting her master's, and I was going to head back to Arkansas as soon as that was over. But God had a different plan. After a year, they put me in the office as an estimator because they had an opening there. And I worked as an estimator and learned that skill. And about the time I learned that skill, the chief estimator left. So I became chief estimator, and I worked as an estimator for a while. Again, all these processes, I'm learning everything about the company and the operation of the company. But through that process, God had his hand on me, and every time I would master one skill within the company, God would move me to another position. And for 17 years, God moved me around this company to where I knew everything about the operation of this company, what it did, and I moved up to a point where I was vice president in charge of the UPS account for this company. But shortly after that, they sold. A company out of the United Kingdom bought us, and I know there's probably some people here that have accounting backgrounds, but they were accountants, not construction people. And they ran by the numbers. I'll give you one instance of how they treated their employees. We talk about taking care of our employees. I'd sold the largest job in the company's history about 4 months before the company sold. It was a $63 million job, and the company at that point did bonuses. And each year, when you sold a job like this, your bonus was paid out in that year. Well, a month before the bonuses were paid out to me for this $63 million job, they put out an announcement, we're not going to pay bonuses again. That always gave me a sense of security and that they were looking after me and taking care of me. But God had something else because I was so loyal. It was a small family-owned business, and if God hadn't intervened in that way, I would have been with them forever. I was happy. I was making good money. It was an easy job I loved doing, but God had a different plan. So through that, through a lot of different things, how they didn't take care of their employees, I started praying about what God would do. People had always been telling me that I need to go into business. I was an entrepreneur. I could fix things, and I was a problem solver. And I went to my support group, my counselors, and each one of them, one by one, said, yes, Tom, you should do it. Yes, Tom, you should do it. Of course, I had a lot of reasons why I shouldn't do it, but I thought, for sure, my wife will not let me do this because of the risk. You know, this is risky. We're taking all our savings, everything we do it, and starting a company. There's a lot of risk. And we've been, we're on up there in age. It's not time to start all over. So I went to my wife and said, okay, Beth, should I do this? She looked at me point blank and said, yes, you should do this. So my wife is one. Because she did that, my wife also owns 51% of the shares of stock. I said, if I'm going to run a business, you're going to own it. So I work for my wife. So that's really my story of how we got to, our decision was made, that's how we got to start DCI. But when we started DCI, and really before we started DCI, we decided if we were going to do this at this point in our life and risk everything, we wanted to do something that was kingdom-based. And so basically we set out from the beginning to give back to the kingdom. That was our goal. That's what we wanted to do. And we had to set up some principles for us as business people to decide what we were going to do. First thing I did was I made a good salary at the company I worked for. I was a vice president. It was good. I took my salary that I had and cut it in half and capped my salary. So day one, my salary was capped at half of what I'd made before. And so that went along, and that way we had to decide some questions there. We had to live like the rest of them did. We had to decide what was enough. What could we live on as a family, and what could we do with? And that way we could give more to the kingdom. Now, to let you know, this capping thing was pretty serious for me because during the downturn, my salary was half of what it was before. I cut it again during the downturn, and I'll talk a little bit about that before. So as president of the corporation, my salary today is $20,000 less than it was when I started the company 10 years ago, and it's been successful because we know what is enough. We had to set giving goals. Our original goal was to seek the peace and prosperity of the city which we're in, Memphis, Tennessee. We started supporting ministries from day one, getting involved in ministries, encouraging our employees to be involved in ministry. Could talk a lot about that, but we set giving goals. Our first goal was to be able to give away $1 million a year. God has a bigger plan than we did, so we got through that pretty quick, but we set those goals. And now our goal today is to give away 50% of our income. no matter how much. Somebody's asked me how much is enough. I said, how much need is there in God's kingdom? Faithfulness in small things. We realized from the beginning that if we're going to be obedient to God's call, then we had to be faithful in small things. So when God gave us $10, we gave out of 10. And He gave us $20, and we gave out of 20. And if He gave us 30, and we continued on. So we were faithful. That's what God told me in my call, to be faithful to Him in the small things. So we started small. I know a lot of people think, they get tied up in the big numbers. It's not how much, it's how faithful. Talked about that. Another question we have is, what is the opportunity cost? When we're looking at buying something, we say, what is the opportunity cost of that? My wife, she drives a very nice car. It's a new car. It's a Ford Escape. Pretty basic car. But could she drive a more expensive car? Yes, she could. But when we looked at the more expensive car and we looked at the Escape, the difference between the two costs of those two vehicles will feed, clothe, and educate 42 children in Rwanda for a year. Nothing wrong with a more expensive car at all. We simply chose to feed the children. So we understand. We look at everything as far as what is the opportunity cost. If I do this, what kingdom work can I not do? I think I'm going to have to move. Yeah, I'm doing okay. I've been promised I'm going to get this through in an hour, right, Chris? Just kidding. Then we went international because God gave us so much. Seeking the peace and prosperity of the city, God gave us more than we can utilize in that way. And then we started going international, supporting orphanages, supporting Bible translation, supporting microfinance all over the world. Again, as God grew, we grew with Him. He showed us how to go. And we also understand, as a part of our stewardship model, we are simply stewards. The company's God's, the money's God. Not just the money we give away, but the money we keep. We're simply stewards of the resources God's given us, as well as we're stewards of the talents God's given us. Okay, the journey. This is when DCI started. This has been a wild ride. We're going to talk about growth, talk about volume growth. We started the company in 2000. Actually, our first year of operation was 2001. We did $187,000 in volume in 2001. In 2002, we did 1.7. Then we did 4.7. Then we did 9.8, 17, 34, 43, then 70. That was a climb that we did. God was continually blessing us in growth, volume-wise. It's remarkable. It's the same way that I saw God's fingerprints the time He was preparing me for my call. But I also saw God's fingerprints here. Every time we would master some level of something, somebody would come to us with something else, and we continued. God was directing us, and everyone in the company looks back and just shakes their head at God's providence in the volume. We also believe in no debt. Now, I'm going to define debt because people define debt differently. I believe debt is money that you borrow in excess of your ability to pay back. So our assumption was, if we have accounts receivable of $1 million and accounts payable of $500,000, if we could reach into our line of credit for the $500 to that other $500,000 to that other comes in. So we don't consider that debt. So we started out with a line of credit, but we had no debt. We started the company with our own funds. We had no debt there. As of 4 years ago, we grew the company to the point where we don't use our line of credit anymore. We have a $6 million line of credit. We haven't touched it in 3.5 years because we believe in operating off of our funds. We believe that's biblically based, and we believe it's financially responsible. People, it's absolutely amazing about the people God's brought to us. We started out that first year with 2 people. Then the first part of the second year, we got a very, very nice job on a Friday. And I go, ooh, this is bigger than we expected. I don't have anybody to do this. Then a guy that I used to work for from the old company called me and said, I just lost my job. Do you have a job for me? And if I could have wrote on Friday, if I could have wrote a description of the person I would want to hire for this job, it would have been him. And he called me on Monday. Another instance, I had a guy by the name of Chris Ferris, my director of field operations, called me on Friday afternoon. He says, I'm sick of this. I want to go to a kingdom-based business. Will you hire me? I said, yeah, we don't have anything for you to do, but we'll hire you. The next week, towards the end of the week, we got a call from a client that said, I have a program that I want you to do for us, and it's fast track. I need you to start tomorrow. Chris went to work that day. I could tell you story and story. I'd be here longer than Chris wants me to be here about how God has blessed us with our employees. And as we grew, he continued to do that over and over and over, all the way up to 40 employees. It's incredible, the stories we have. Oops, wrong one. And we grew into giving. I already talked about our giving. We started out, again, intending to reach $1 million goal. God blessed us, and we blew through that after 4 years. Incredible what God did. And he's continuing to bless us today. And we had a plan. I did a business plan. When I started the company, I did a 1, 2, 5, and 10-year business plan. Well, our 10-year business plan, we had projected that we would hit $20 million. Well, obviously, in year 3, I was threatening that pretty bad. So the thing is, we kept the plan. Now, we would, every 6 months, we reworked the plan, especially in the early years. We'd rework the plan, look at what the plan said, and we worked the plan very hard. So as we grew, we continued to rework the plan. The struggles. You can imagine in a business that's growing like ours, with all the pressure and challenges of growing a business, in the end of our 3rd year, where we had $4.3 million in sales, somebody got disgruntled with us and filed a $1.2 million lawsuit against us. Okay, folks, my faith went out the window. I did not sleep well at night. I probably had an ulcer during the time, and really, I look back and I think, man, why didn't I trust God? Because he's been good. Because I look back and again, I see God in this. Because at $4.3 million, if that lawsuit had settled that day for 1.25, I wouldn't be here today. It would have been over. But God wasn't finished with me. And it's interesting because I believe it was a frivolous lawsuit, and in the end, we won. But the lawsuit, because of our court system, took 3.5 years. At the end of the 3.5 years, we ended up selling for what we offered day one, and it wasn't even a blimp on our radar. And it had kept us conservative and trusting God during that time. And I must admit, though, many days during that time, I'd go to bed at night, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was still not asleep. I didn't trust God for what he was doing. And now I look back, and that was one of my sins. But that was a struggle that we had during the first years. It's interesting. A lot of the struggles the company has, finding volume and doing stuff like that, God brought that to us, but he brought these kind of struggles there to keep us humble. And it did humble me. Okay, then we all know the story. We're going along fat and happy, and here comes the financial crisis. And it could have been, is it a downturn or crash and burn? And, we have a huge advantage as a company because DCI does large projects. So we'll get a project, and it'll extend from a year to 2 years sometimes. So exactly at the time we had the financial crisis, God had already seen it coming and prepared us for it. We had a $44 million job that lasted 2 years that we were only about 6 months into. We had a $20 million job we just landed the contract and was starting on. So we had a huge advantage. We saw it coming. We knew it was coming. But because of that 6 months, and plus our industry is a 6-month lag. A lot of people have already come out of the recession. We're just now coming out because we have a lag. When you start shipping packages, which we do as package handling systems, it takes 6 months before you can actually get a new system in the process and get it building. So we're about a 6-month lag, and plus our large project backlog. But we knew it was coming. So what are we going to do about it? Well, the first thing we did was pray. We spent a lot of time in prayer, and we knew it was coming. The work was coming off, and I made another mistake here. I think I'll refer to it as the second great struggle here. Yeah, I'll talk about the slide, then I'll talk about the second great struggle. The slide is we went from $70 million to $42 million to $20 million. So, when you're in business, that's a pretty big struggle. Our break even after our layoffs was $25 million. So, we're shaking. So the slide happens pretty fast. But the second great struggle I have is my greatest weakness is people. I'm not a great HR person. I'm not a great people person. And I hate with a passion laying off people. So I kept procrastinating. I kept not doing what I knew was the right thing to do. We carried 25% of our staff for 6 months to do this. Actually, they did because we actually had some of them go do ministry work and volunteer in the city and stuff. But finally, it came to the point, and by the way, I told you my wife owns 51% of the shares. She's not involved. She's involved a little bit in the operation, but I run the operations. She is the greatest counselor in business that I have because she has a completely different perspective on business than I do. And she has given me every piece of advice. When she looks at me and says, do it, I know to do it because everyone that she's done that to me has been a blessing to me. But at this point in time, she just came to me and said, Tom, I know it's painful for you. I know it's a struggle, but you've got to cut back. The company has to survive to give to the kingdom and do what God's called you to do. You need to do your layoffs. That was hard. And I could talk a lot about the layoff process and how much pain. I lost sleep over this one too. But we did the right thing, and God has blessed that. We did cost cutting. One of the first things we did, we believe in our employees, so we reward our employees well, but we stopped our 401k match. We matched 4 for 5, which is pretty good for a small company. So that was one of the first things we did. We started looking at everything that we did and tried to cut costs in every area of the company. There was nothing that was sacred in our cost cutting. Then as soon as we did that, we did our layoffs. We looked at our cost cuttings, and we're talking about we haven't bottomed out yet. The economy's still going down. We see the implosion of the real estate market. At that point in time, we said, okay, now, God's called us to do this. Let's look to the future. So instead of continuing to cut and doing those kind of things, we came up with our executive team. I have an 8-member executive team that supports me. We looked at everything, every process we did, everything that we did, and said, okay, how can we improve? We're slow. We don't have a lot of work. What can we do to improve ourselves for the future? Because God's preparing us for the future. So we looked at every process, every detail, every procedure, every manual, and redid it all during this time. We also looked at new clients. We went into this thing, we grew our business on basically 2 clients. Bad business decision. But when you're growing that fast, you don't look back at those kind of things. UPS and FedEx Ground were our 2 major customers. And we really went into this downturn with 2 customers. So we said, okay, we're diversified conveyors. Let's look at new customers. So we started looking at new customers. And we were still going down. We hadn't hit bottom yet. And by the way, our last year where we did $20 million, half of that volume was with new customers we did not have when the downturn happened. Okay? So we dropped down. And it's interesting, I told you we got down to $20 million. Our break even was 25. But because we'd re-honed our processes and reevaluated the way we're doing things, we actually were able to make money at $20 million when our break even by the model was 25, and we were able to give to the kingdom that year. Because I sent a letter to all the people we sponsored and said, hey, we're not going to make profits, we're not going to give, and God blessed us, and we were able to give, even in the downturn, even when our volume that low. Okay, doing good on time. I'm here, Chris. We came out with 5 clients. We went in with 5 clients or markets. We went in with 2. Basically now, if you look at us, we have automotive. We're doing automotive work. In fact, this year, starting out with a lot of automotive work, we do baggage systems for airport baggage. We're doing a job right now in Charlotte at the airport baggage. So we went in with 2, and we looked at this as an opportunity because we weren't so busy. When we're growing at 60, 70% clips a year, we didn't have time to diversify. So we looked at this as an opportunity for us to diversify, and we found other clients and made the contacts and started out small, and now we're climbing out using them. Like I said, we honed every procedure we got. Now we're a more effective company. We're actually, for us, to the field is our time. When we get a job from engineering, manufacturing to the field is a period of time that most companies our size would make that longer than we would. But because we've honed our process, we're quicker to the field than most of our competitors now. And we're actually getting jobs because we can get to them now quicker than our competitors are. So we honed every single process we had during this downturn. New technology. Basically, we stopped and said, okay, this is everybody was saying, cut costs, cut costs. Then I walked in the office and said, okay, we're upgrading our entire computer system, and we're going to 3D AutoCAD instead of 2D AutoCAD. Everybody thought I was nuts. But the industry's been going that way for years. We're going to have to go that way. We shrunk down, and we put the expenditure in. It was a capital expenditure, but it was a right expenditure. Now we're prepared for the future like we've never been prepared. I look at this downturn, and I've told my executive committee this many, many times. God used this to make us a better company. There's a lot of companies that haven't made it through this thing, But the ones that have made it through, that have done some of these steps, are going to be better companies for the future. I also did a lot of training during this time. Good opportunity, you're slow, get your people extra training, cross-training. Good thing at this time is we're starting to climb out. There is a lot of good folks out there. I don't know if any of you have been in the market lately. We've got a bunch of great resumes. So now we're looking out there, we're picking some of the best of the crop to move forward with from the resumes we got. Okay, so that's sort of the DCI story. That's one half of our story. The other half is sort of different. I told you that it was our objective to give 50% of our income to missions. Well, basically, that's we're a pass-through corporation, S corporation. So basically, 501c3 corporations, we can give away up to 50% of our income, and then after that, it's a tax issue. We have to give away our tax. Not that that drives our source, but we said, okay, let's take what we can give away to 501c3s and use that to alleviate taxes. But on what we have to pay for taxes, let's take a different approach. Let's take the money, because again, we know what's enough. And God has given us way more than what's enough. And by the way, don't get us wrong, we live in abundance. God's given us plenty. Anybody who lives in America lives in abundance. I don't know if you know this or not. According to theglobalrichlist.com, if you make $875, not a week, not a month, but a year, you make more than half the world. How about that? If you make $50,000 a year, you make more than 98% of the world. Incredible. So we had decided what's enough, and so there was extra money that we'd already paid taxes on, so we said, okay, let's start kingdom businesses. Let's start businesses that are for kingdom purposes. I'm only going to give one example. Ikirawa Investments is the company we set up to do this. And by the way, in Rwanda, Ikirawa is spelled one way, but it has two meanings according to how do you say it. So you can either, Ikirawa means the bridge between America and Rwanda, or it can mean a cattle stall. So according to how you pronounce it. But Ikirawa Investments was the company we set up, because I'm a problem solver. And Ikirawa Investments is, I started in Rwanda, but I went to Rwanda on a trip, and I saw kids. I saw acute malnourishment everywhere. And, their diet, usually for the children, are potatoes and cassava. But for brain development between 0 and 5 years old, you need protein and fat in your diet. So my question was, as a businessman, as a problem solver, how do I get protein to these kids? So, eggs. I started out with cattle, but anybody here that understands the transition rate, it's like an 8-to-1 ratio to get protein out of cattle, so that's too high. I dropped down to chicken. It's a much better ratio, 1.5-to-1 to get protein out. But in Rwanda, if there's a chicken, the father is going to eat it. It's a tribal-type, patriarchal society. If there's a chicken in the house, the father's going to eat it, and the kids are not going to get it. And I wanted it from 0 to 5 years old for brain development. The only way we could get it there affordably was with eggs. So business is a mission. This is a business with a mission. The mission of this business is to provide protein for the children. But it's a business first. This is not an NGO. This is not a charity. Sustainability. A model shows sustainability. When we start a business like that, it is going to be sustainable. It's going to be long term. When I back away from it and I'm in heaven with the Lord, it's going to continue. And I have to speed up here. Got to be profitable. It's got to be developmental, where we're creating jobs and helping the economy. It's got to be scalable, where we can do it more and more and more. It's the kind of things we all talk about in our business. I make 5 trips a year to Rwanda and do this thing, but there's a problem with the model, and I'm going to leave you with this. The problem with the model is 0 to 5-year-old children in poor countries cannot afford eggs, and their parents won't buy them for them. So my model is only half complete. I've got a business. It's sustainable. But the way the business is set up, and I'm going to show you a video here in just a second. The website we've set up is www.oneegg.org. And on that website, you can go there and you can actually sponsor a child for a year. For $60 a year, you can sponsor a child 5 eggs a day for 52 weeks a year for a child for $60 a year. And the reason why I did this is because the business is the business, and the business is going to run like a business, but the business couldn't give away enough eggs to do anything with charity. So the business, in conjunction with this website, does it. And the way the business is set up, whenever the business gives more than 50% of their eggs are paid for by one egg, we start another site, more business, more development, more Rwandans working and stuff like that. So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot more I could say, but if we could, I'm going to play a short video as I go sit down. This is a video that we've done to support this business's missions operation in Rwanda. Got the video?
We live in a world where some kids still go to sleep hungry. It doesn't take long, and they stop growing like they should. Become so sick they can't play or go to school, or even worse. We can all help, and it's as simple as one egg. When a kid receives eggs, they get protein and nutrients needed to be healthy, grow, play, and learn. And because the people at oneegg.org work with locals who grow the chickens that lay the eggs, they also create jobs helping those kids' parents too. It doesn't stop there. Because of this chicken business, they build chicken coops, buy food for their chickens, give them vaccines, purchase supplies, and transport the eggs, all which creates jobs for other people. And when the chickens grow up, they are sold at the markets, providing protein and nutrients for other families and even more jobs too. And even though all this happens with just one egg, for many kids, buying that egg just isn't an option. That's where we can get involved. You, me, our families, our classes at school, our church, your office, all of us. All it takes is $5 a month to provide eggs for one kid. Just think, nearly everyone has $5. $5 is that one cup of coffee, or popcorn at the movie, or the game you play online with your friends. Or $5 can be a simple and easy way to get involved with Hunger Today and sponsor a One Egg location. It's really cool. You get a picture of the actual kids you're helping and progress reports to let you know that you are making an impact. Imagine if you sponsor a kid, then share your experience by asking your friends to do the same, then their friends join in and their friends' friends. Before you know it, thousands of lives are changed and thousands of families have an opportunity to be lifted from poverty and hunger, and it all starts with you in one little egg. So don't wait, it only takes a minute, you can afford it, and it will make a huge difference. Join all of us and sponsor a One Egg location right now. oneegg.org, changing the world one egg at a time.
What questions do you have? I covered a lot in a hurry. God's blessed the company. A lot of things have happened. So any questions about anything that I've talked about today?
Is that video on your website?
Yes, it's on One Egg, www.oneegg.org. Yes.
You can get a copy of it?
Oh, yeah.
How are you ensuring accountability on the funds that go overseas?
That is a great thing. If anybody that's worked overseas understand that's a huge issue. We're actually tied in. OneEgg.org is part of the National Christian Foundation. And basically, we're working on the process of how that goes, accountability. The first sites are being done through an Anglican bishop in Rwanda. We have a person on site from One Egg that's actually going to monitor the sites. All the eggs have to be eaten on site because, again, they're for 0 to 5-year-old children, so they can't be taken home. They will be prepared on site at the different sites we do this at, and that's part of it. There's a lot going on there. We understand there is a lot of issues with integrity and stuff like that over there, and we have the National Christian Foundation set up a whole list of requirements for a site to be funded by One Egg.
Tom, can you tell us a little bit about what it took to set up a business in Rwanda? So different here than the U.S. Share some of your experience.
Yeah, in Africa, one of my gifts is patience. If my wife was here right now, she'd be laughing. One thing you have to learn in a third world country, in Rwanda specifically, and also in some of my experiences in other places, it doesn't happen nearly as fast as it does here. You have to deal with what the gentleman mentioned a while ago. Corruption in a lot of places is a big, big issue. The difficulty in setting up a business is very different from the States because there's no infrastructure. You have to set up the infrastructure for the business as you go. This chicken operation, we've tried to buy feed locally, but because of quality issues and because of other issues, we're actually going to set up another business now to produce feed because we don't have that infrastructure to be able to provide the birds. There's all kinds of legal issues. Rwanda is good because Rwanda is promoting business, and we've worked directly with the Minister of Infrastructure and the Minister of Agriculture for this, so we have a lot of government support on what we're doing. But I would say the difficulty of starting a business in Africa compared to starting a business in the U.S. is at least fourfold. And you better have patience, because there's a saying we have. It's called TIA. This is Africa. And I'll give you a little example of that too. If you're in Africa and you say you want to have a meeting with somebody at 2 o'clock tomorrow, and they show up at 5, you ask them, where you been? It's today. That's the way they think. Cultural differences. In fact, if somebody here likes to read a book called African Friends and Money Matters. It'll tell you the difference culturally, what you say and what they understand, and what they say and what you understand. We think like the West. They don't think like us. So if you're going to move into a culture, you need to understand the culture you're working in.
What was the name of that book again?
The book is African Friends and Money Matters.
I'm just curious if the ministry has attracted any business to you. If you've had any
Can I get you the mic so we could hear?
I realize that the business feeds the ministry, but I was just wondering, does the ministry ever feed the business? Have you attracted customers because of your mission?
There are customers that are in that chart we talked about yesterday. They're not for us or they're not against us. Okay. There are a small percentage that because we do what we do and they know we do it, and by the way, we don't make it. You go to our office, we have a hallway. There's our missions hallway that shows all the different works. We're involved in some, DCI is involved in some 54 ministries throughout the world. So everybody that we work for knows it. Most people are just neutral to it, but there are a couple people that like that and do bring work our way because of that. But probably a small percentage.
Tom, question here on sustainability. How is this actually sustainable if you still have donations going from the U.S. to oneegg.org?
Okay. The business is sustainable because it sells eggs to One Egg. The business is a completely separate model. And what the model is set up for is to produce a model where a person can put in so much capital, and that capital will take them to the point of sustainability, which should be 18 months of operation after you start. But they're selling the eggs. Half of them have to be sold in the local market to develop the market. And then the reason why One Egg is buying half the eggs, because the children 0 to 5 years old can't afford them and can't get them there. But the business is separate from One Egg. One Egg is a vehicle that are produced, because if we start giving donations to the business, that's not sustainable, and that's not what we want to do. So we're running them in conjunction. That's why I showed you One Egg, to understand that when we do this, if we can do both of them together and have them work together, because everybody in this organization of Ikirawa and the egg operation understands they got to make a profit. They're evaluated on making a profit. They have nothing to do with One Egg. So if they don't sell their eggs, if they don't get the feed at the right price, if they don't do all the things they're supposed to do, the business will fail.
Tom, another question. As a follow-up on doing business in Africa, you are a conveyor guy, engineer. Eggs are totally different, chicken, livestock. How did you see God show up in people helping you figure that out?
That is a great question. Because when I went over there, the third trip I was over there, I was still trying to solve this, and I just came to a resolution through research and development, all the stuff I was doing through a lot of research, that eggs was the answer. And I know nothing about eggs. I can tell you what an egg looks like, and I know what it tastes like, but I know nothing about eggs. So when I was in Rwanda on that trip, I said, okay, God, I really believe you're calling me to do this. And I really believe it's something that's feasible, the plan works, but I don't know anything about chickens. So God, I'm going to throw the fleece out. If you don't bring somebody to me that knows something about chickens, I'm not doing this. So I threw out the fleece. I got back from Africa Tuesday, a week and a half after I got back, I got a call from a lady by the name of Janice Hoffman. By the way, I'd like, if you guys would, when you pray, remember Janice in your prayers. She will probably be with the Lord soon. And she actually says this was what God called her to do, to start what we're doing before she died. But she has a degenerative brain disease. But Janice called me with her passion for Africa. She works for the number one protein producer in the world. And she called me up and said, Tom, I hear you're working in Africa. Well, we're looking at Rwanda, and we want to start an effort to alleviate acute malnutrition in Africa, and we're looking for somebody to partner with us. We don't want to put any money into it. We just want to provide technical knowledge. We want to provide training. So this company, which without press release, I won't talk about their name, they're a big, big company. They send somebody over there every 2 months and train the Rwandans on poultry science. So the part of the model is that when we walk away, the Rwandans will understand the business operation and everything that's going on. And part of my model is once my original investment is recovered,
Well, we went to Q&A because
then Rwandans will own it and I will walk away. So my plan is between 5 and 10 years from now, it will be owned by Rwandans and I'll be doing something else. That's also part of the sustainability model, because if I own it forever and bring the money to America, that's not any good. But if Rwandans own it, Rwandans understand it, then we got protein that's long term.
Hey, Tom.
Yes.
My name is Javon. My question is, Jesus talked about it's better to give than receive, that statement. And I saw in just that coming alive in your presentation and your life work. And have you seen more than just like, hey, it feels good and I'm obeying kind of thing, like practically in your businesses? And what have you learned from that? Like this practical, how business works with it's better to give than receive philosophy?
Well, one thing is, the primary example is God has brought the employees that He's brought. I believe that DCI has the best employees in the industry, and I've been in this industry 25 years. And God has brought them one at a time, not because they can make more money, because actually they can't. We have a policy that we pay just a little bit under the regular wage and reward folks with bonuses when we're profitable. That's just my philosophy. I want skin in the game. So everybody there, including myself, because you've already heard about my salary constraints, I could go somewhere else and make more money. I want them here because this is God's business. Now, I will admit, most of our employees get a 25 to 30% bonus every year when we do well. They did that every year except last year because of the downturn. But as far as what you're saying, it's better to give than receive. I'm sure a lot of y'all have seen Chariots of Fire. Everybody familiar with that? You remember when Eric Little is talking, he says, when I run, I feel God's pleasure. That's the way I feel when I'm doing this, when I'm involved in Rwanda, in Memphis, in India, in China, in Guatemala. I feel God's pleasure. There is nothing like it in the world. It's a joy that's down deep inside, and money won't buy it, nothing will buy it. It's just God's pleasure. And it's almost like, even though He hasn't said it, and I hope, I'm like the person said it yesterday, I want to hear it when I get to heaven. Well done, my good and faithful servant. But it's like I feel His pleasure when I'm doing what He's called me to do. It's wonderful. Questions? I don't see any other questions? All right. I guess that's it. Turn it back over to somebody else.